Sequels, live-action remakes, and multiverses are all the rage in Hollywood these days. And while these aren't bad ideas in concept, the results have been a muddled mess of franchise repetition, each new installment striving to get out from under the shadow of its predecessor, and ultimately failing. But in 2024, there's been a noted shift. Huge films have come out almost every month, and for the first time, consistently anyway, they have all failed. Not just creatively, but financially. I mean, even halfway decent films which came out but were based on previously created IPs have flopped in the box office. Which is why I think we've begun to witness a different phenomenon. The death of the Hollywood franchise. All brands are built on trust. It's a way to support loyal customers and a growing industry. And while the culprit has constantly shifted, the entertainment industry is no different. First it was studios, then it was actors, and now it's IP, franchises. And yet in the last year, these movies have begun not to just struggle, but to outright fail. Joker 2, Furiosa, and most recently, Gladiator 2. I watched the movie over Thanksgiving, and I kind of left the theater confused. I mean, it wasn't good. But it wasn't as bad as people claimed either. So it got me thinking, why? I mean, why are these movies doing so badly in the box office, and why are the fans so angry about them? Historically, franchises began to get popular in the early 90s and 2000s, and with the emergence of the MCU, Hollywood made a mad dash for intellectual property, hoping to find another way to farm hundreds of films from a single idea or property. We got sequels for Predator, Alien, Rocky, Terminator, and, of course, Disney Star Wars.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
But 10 years later, we're on our fourth Superman, and even the MCU has begun to parody itself, bringing back RDJ as another character in hopes that he can save the franchise. See, if I were to name the film industry's current problem in a single word, it would be nostalgia. A desire to capitalize on the emotional attachment to classic franchises and recreate great memories without putting in the time, money, or skill required to earn it, without creating art. Now, this can work, but only so much. Nostalgia earns attention, perhaps even a movie ticket, but it can't make a bad story good. Nostalgia is a hook. It's a vague emotional value which we attribute to the happy memories and simpler times. Without an engaging story, it isn't much to rely on. And because of its inherent emotionality, it's subjective and incredibly fickle. Let's look specifically at Gladiator II. The first film came out in the year 2000, and honestly, it still holds up. The set design, the score, and of course the fights are all incredible. But what's interesting is that by far, the best parts of the film are its tight plot and well-written characters, and I think the same can be said for many of the mainstream action movies of the time. The sequel was released 24 years later, following a series of mediocre films by director Ridley Scott, who seems to be on a mission to make as many movies as he can in his elderly age. Gladiator II tries to continue an obviously finished story, and it spends half its runtime trying to justify its existence as a sequel, when I honestly think it would have just been better off as another sword and sandals blockbuster film. Lesser controversies like Denzel's lack of accent or the Archer wife character at the beginning of the movie, which I really didn't think was a problem at all, completely disappeared when I watched the movie. The film was fine. It had cool action, competent performances, and a somewhat compelling plot. But what stuck out to me when I was watching it, what I think damned it most, was that it was a sequel. It didn't help the audience develop emotional connections with its characters because it relied on the emotional connections from the previous film. At every moment, it seemed to mirror the original and reminded me of a film I liked so much more, whose legacy this one directly affected. And this is where I think the core issue lies. Because nostalgia is all about emotions and childhood memories, sentiments can quickly sour. And when these memories are tarnished or tainted, the fans feel betrayed. Which brings me to the larger point of this video. People no longer trust studios with their favorite IPs, and the benefit of the doubt that used to bring audiences to theaters now has kind of turned into resentment, mistrust, and hate. This is why Gladiator II and even films like Alien Romulus or Furiosa had such a mixed reception. Perhaps it's just because I've been covering more of these stories, but this past year seems to have been the pinnacle of fandom resentment. Star Wars Acolyte, Rings of Power Season 2, and now Gladiator II. Conversations around these properties all quickly devolving into vapid screaming and accusations, one side calling the other toxic, and the other blaming companies for their prioritization of content and racial metrics over storytelling. Both sides have some points, but their polarized dismissal of one another is entirely counterproductive. If these sequels and remakes were only leeching off of older works, then we should call all of it lazy and ignore it. But see, the situation worsens when the creators purposefully ignore and sometimes even maltreat the trust of the fan base. Here are some undeniable facts. When it comes to creative works, you are entirely at the mercy of the consumers. This applies to all art, like this channel, books, comics, and full-on blockbuster films. It's why even cancel culture has had its place in the creative world, at least when reasonably applied. But that's a topic for a separate video. New IPs risk having an audience, and pre-existing ones don't. That's their advantage. So studios pretending these people don't exist are insane. I mean, the audience gives their product value, and if studio execs and actors are really convinced that fans' opinions are corrupt and bigoted, then they shouldn't invest in that property in the first place. It's like this weird game of I can change him, except with millions of dollars instead of an edgy ex-boyfriend. I mean, if you don't condone womanizing, don't adapt James Bond. Fans are the life force of a franchise, the deciding factor if a project will live or die from the start. As someone who writes myself, I firmly believe that good stories must be told, that if you have a genuinely great idea, you are compelled to manifest it, almost against your own will. And I think that's what Gladiator, and even many of these now mainstream franchises like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings were. A risk, a prayer, a passion project from artists compelled by their creativity. Franchises are awesome because they give the audience a saga to follow and the artist the time and money to really flex their creative muscles and tell a truly sprawling narrative. But today, that meaning has been lost. Over-reliance on nostalgia not only heralds failure, but turns the audience's love into active resentment. And I think this constant stream of sequels and remakes have begun the slow and painful death of the Hollywood franchise. So, whether it's in the hands of studios or independents or even creators like you and me, I think the only real question remaining is, how do we bring it back to life? Or can we? But these are just my thoughts and opinions on the matter. I would love to know what you guys think about this whole topic in the comments down below. Do you think that we're witnessing the death of the Hollywood franchise? What did you guys think of Gladiator II? And what movie do you think deserves a sequel? As always, feel free to like and subscribe, and if you want access to ad-free content, early access to be able to vote on future videos, consider checking out the Patreon link down below. And as always, no matter what you do, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you all in the next video.